1 minute ago, Israel just sent a two-word message that sent shockwaves through London, and Karma's face reportedly turned white. 2 words. That's all it took to throw Labour into total panic mode and send Westminster scrambling for damage control. 2 words, just 2, and the entire British government has been thrown into meltdown. Forget press conferences. Forget polite diplomacy. Israel's government just broke every rule and went straight diplomatic war. That's the phrase. No spin, no diplomacy, no back-channel whispers, just a blunt, brutal declaration that ripped through the heart of Downing Street like a thunderclap. Starmer, the man who only days ago was being hailed as bold and principled for recognizing Palestine state, suddenly looks cornered, shaken, and isolated. Something massive is happening behind the scenes. The moment the message landed in London, panic spread like wildfire. Within minutes, officials were rushing into late-night meetings. Phones were buzzing non-stop, and the corridors of Whitehall fell into silence as ministers were told to drop everything and head straight to Downing Street. This wasn't a normal diplomatic disagreement. This was something different, something sharper, something that shook the very foundations of Britain's foreign policy. The phrase used in Israel's statement was short, brutal, and impossible to misinterpret. A signal that the relationship between the two countries had entered dangerous, uncharted territory. Inside Starr's office, the mood collapsed instantly. Just days earlier, Labour ministers had been celebrating what they described as a bold and historic decision, smiling for cameras, presenting themselves as confident leaders of a new chapter for Britain. But the smiles have vanished. And now those same ministers are pacing the halls with hushed voices whispering about the fallout and wondering if Starmer has just made the biggest mistake of his career. Sources claim the Prime Minister was visibly shaken, struggling to respond as the weight of Israel's words sank in. It wasn't just the message. It was the speed, the bluntness, and the fact that Israel had made no attempt to soften the blow. It was a declaration of hostility, plain and simple. And Westminster knew it. As the hours ticked by, the pressure only grew worse. Reports suggest that Starmer locked himself in his office, refusing to take certain calls, snapping at aides who begged him to respond quickly. Some described the atmosphere in Downing Street as suffocating, with ministers arguing openly about whether to defend the decision or quietly retreat. Labour insiders admit that they were caught off guard by the scale of Israel's backlash. They expected criticism. They expected tough words. But they did not expect this. And the fact that Israel chose to deliver its message in just 2 words only made the situation more humiliating. The bluntness has left Starr exposed, looking weak and unprepared in the face of an ally willing to escalate the dispute with no hesitation. Meanwhile, the opposition wasted no time striking back. Conservative MPs took to the airwaves, blasting Labour's leadership and accusing Starr of gambling recklessly with Britain's international standing. This is what happens when you put ideology before reality, thundered one senior Tory voice on live television. Another went further, demanding to know how the government planned to repair the damage before Britain's credibility collapsed altogether. The media seized on the chaos, splashing sensational headlines about Starr being blindsided, ministers in meltdown, and Britain teetering on the edge of a diplomatic disaster. For a man who built his political career on promises of competence and calm, the optics could not be worse. But here's the part that terrifies Labour insiders the most. Israel's 2 words were not an empty threat. Leaks from Jerusalem suggest that further measures are being drafted. Measures that could deepen Britain's isolation and cut off key partnerships overnight. Embassies could be recalled, agreements could be frozen, and doors that Britain once relied on could slam shut without warning. Every scenario being whispered behind closed doors points to one conclusion: this crisis is far from over, and Israel has every intention of turning up the heat. And yet, despite the chaos abroad, something strange is happening at home. Early polls indicate that ordinary Britons are not punishing Starmer for his decision. In fact, support for Labour has ticked upward, with some voters praising the Prime Minister for showing backbone, even in the face of fierce backlash. It's a paradox that has left Westminster even more unsettled. How can Starmer look so weak on the world stage yet so strong in domestic opinion polls? Ministers are clinging to those numbers like a lifeline, but they know deep down that polls cannot shield them from the fury building outside Britain's borders. As midnight fell over London, the situation grew even darker. European capitals began releasing statements, some urging calm, others warning of escalation, and a few openly questioning whether they should follow Britain's lead or distance themselves before it's too late. Starmer's decision has split the continent, fractured alliances, and forced governments across Europe into a dangerous silence. No one wants to be the next target of Israel's two-word fury. And yet, no one wants to be left behind if Britain manages to weather the storm. The divide is growing and the cracks are spreading. All while Starmer sits isolated in his office, watching the fallout spiral further and further out of control. And now the whispers are growing louder. If Israel's words were only the beginning, what comes next? Will they escalate their response with actions that Britain cannot afford to ignore? Will European allies turn their backs on London in order to save themselves? And most of all, can Starmer survive the storm that is about to hit him hidden? The hours after Israel's message have turned Westminster into a battlefield of whispers, panic, and raw political anger. Downing Street, usually a place of controlled statements and carefully staged photos, now feels like a bunker under siege. Ministers shuffle in and out of closed rooms. Aides exchange frantic notes, and every conversation is wrapped in dread. Nobody dares to say it aloud, but everyone knows the truth. Britain is no longer just managing a dispute. It is standing in the middle of a diplomatic earthquake. And Keir Starmer, the man who only days ago promised stability and calm, now looks like the Prime Minister who has unleashed chaos. Inside government offices, the division is tearing Labour apart. Some senior ministers argue that Starmer must stand firm, that backing down now would be fatal not only for his leadership, but for Britain's credibility on the world stage. Others warn that the cost is already spiraling out of control, urging the Prime Minister to seek a quiet compromise before the damage becomes irreversible. This clash of voices has turned cabinet meetings into shouting matches, with one insider describing the atmosphere as like knives drawn in the dark. The message is clear. Labour is no longer speaking with one voice, and the cracks are widening fuss. Meanwhile, Israel's silence after its initial two-word strike is growing louder with every passing hour. No follow-up, no clarification, no softening of the tone. Just silence. And in diplomacy, silence can be more dangerous than words. Leaks from within Whitehall suggest that officials fear the quiet is a prelude to action. That Israel is preparing steps behind closed doors that will leave Britain humiliated on the global stage. The waiting game has become torture, with every minister wondering what move will come next and when it will hit. The opposition, sensing blood in the water, has unleashed a coordinated attack. Conservative MPs have flooded the airwaves portraying Starmer as reckless, arrogant, and dangerously out of his depth. This government is collapsing under its own hubris. One Tory front bencher declared, hammering the message that Starmer's so-called bold decision has thrown Britain into unnecessary turmoil. Even Reform UK has seized the opportunity, blasting Labour for dragging Britain into what they call a manufactured disaster of epic proportions. For Starmer, this isn't just a foreign policy fight. It's a domestic political storm that threatens to rip away the support he once took for granted. And yet, despite the fury in Westminster, Starmer himself has chosen silence. Insiders say he is drafting a new statement line by line, aware that every word could make the situation either calmer or far worse. The pressure is crushing. His advisors are split, unsure whether to double down or extend a hand of conciliation. The indecision has frozen government operations, leaving ministers frustrated and the public guessing. Rumors swirl that even Starmer's closest allies are beginning to question his judgment, whispering about whether his leadership can withstand the storm that is now circling Britain. Across Europe, the reaction has turned into a dangerous game of hesitation. Germany, rattled by Britain's move has issued vague warnings of destabilization, while France tries to play mediator, pleading for restraint but refusing to take a clear position. Spain and Ireland, who were once ready to follow Britain's lead, have suddenly gone silent, unwilling to risk Israel's wrath. Brussels itself appears divided, trapped between solidarity with a major European power and fear of escalating the crisis further. The European bloc is fracturing in real time, and the cracks are widening with each passing day. But if Europe is nervous, the Arab capitals are watching with careful calculation. Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states see opportunity in Britain's defiance. They have stepped forward with promises of deeper economic ties, bigger trade deals, and investments that could inject billions into Britain's struggling economy. For Starr, these offers look like a lifeline, proof that his gamble could eventually pay off. But there's a dangerous catch. These rewards come only if Britain holds its ground. Retreat now and those offers vanish. Stand firm and the economic doors swing wide open. It's a carrot and stick scenario, and Starmer is caught in the middle of it, knowing that whichever path he chooses, the risks are enormous. And while the geopolitics rage, the domestic mood grows darker. Protests have already begun to form outside Parliament. Crowds chanting slogans, waving banners, and demanding clarity from the government. Police presence has been increased, fearing that demonstrations could spiral into unrest. Community leaders warned that the heated rhetoric from abroad could inflame tensions at home, creating divisions that Labour is ill-prepared to manage. Britain feels on edge, not just politically, but socially. As if one spark could ignite a wider crisis within its own borders. All of this has left Starmer isolated in a way no prime minister can afford. For a man who built his reputation on discipline and control, his current silence speaks volumes. He is trapped in a political vice, squeezed between furious allies abroad, restless critics at home, and the ticking clock of public opinion. Every hour he delays, every moment he hesitates, the pressure builds higher, and the perception of weakness grows stronger. And now the rumors are reaching fever pitch. Insiders whisper that Israel is preparing its next move. And it will not be words this time. But what form will it take? A suspension of relations and economic retaliation, or something even harsher designed to push Britain into total submission? The cliffhanger is brutal and the stakes are higher than ever. So the question now is simple. When Israel finally makes its next move, will Starmer stand firm, or will his entire government collapse under the weight of a crisis it can no longer control? The crisis has now reached its breaking point. What began as two simple words has exploded into a confrontation that has shaken Westminster, divided Europe, and left Britain dangling between opportunity and disaster. For Keir Starmer, the image of being calm, steady, and in control has been torn apart. The Prime Minister now looks like a man standing on quicksand, each step pulling him deeper into a situation he cannot easily escape. Israel's silence after its shocking message is now seen as the calm before the storm. Every cancelled meeting, every delayed response, every icy statement from Jerusalem signals something bigger is on the horizon. Ministers inside Downing Street fear that the next move will not just be symbolic. It could be a direct escalation that will leave Britain publicly humiliated. That looming uncertainty is what terrifies officials most, because in politics, perception is often more powerful than reality. And right now, the perception is that Britain is cornered. Meanwhile, the opposition is sharpening its knives. Conservative MPs accuse Labour of arrogance and recklessness, while Reform UK continues to hammer home the message that Starmer is gambling with the nation's future.